A show that gave the creeps to almost all the kids from the late 90s and early 2000s was Courage the Cowardly Dog. This Cartoon Network series follows Courage, a perpetually scared-out-of-his-wits pink dog who lives in the middle of nowhere, with sweet-yet-delusional Muriel and eternally grumpy Eustace. The farmhouse they live in is visited by monsters, ghosts, and villains, who scare the fur off Courage in each episode. But looking back, maybe some of these visitors were just bad at first impressions. So grab your courage, and snacks, because we're about to meet the most misunderstood villains of Courage the Cowardly Dog. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, let's begin. Number 1. Kitty from The Mask. First up on our list is Kitty from the iconic episode The Mask. Right from the get-go, Kitty drops in on the Bag farmhouse, dressed in the unsettling mask of hers. And before Courage, or the audience for that matter, can process WTF is happening here, she grabs a sink and whacks him with it. If that's not a classic case of mistaken first appearance, I don't know what is. But looking back, Kitty literally and figuratively masks her trauma and projects it onto Courage. Kitty's hatred for Courage wasn't random. It stemmed from her deep-rooted dislike of dogs. It slowly brewed over the years of watching her best friend Bunny, who was trapped in a toxic relationship with the abusive Mad Dog. Then, after being thrown out of her own home and threatened to be killed if she returned, Kitty donned the mask and began projecting her contempt for dogs by lashing out at them, with Courage being one of the unsuspecting victims caught in the crossfire. But underneath all her fiery energy and constant side eyes that Kitty keeps throwing left and right, she's what you'd call a girl's girl. The way she treasures Bunny, her friend, is more like a family heirloom, with claws out the instant she feels her friend is in any danger. Yeah, she's moody, and can also get brutally blunt at times, with Muriel and Eustace at the receiving end of her roasting. She's someone who's not afraid to point out the skeletons in your closet, point blank. Yeah, she can get a little mean sometimes, but at the root of it all lies a loyal heart that's ready to tear apart anyone who dares go against her loved ones, in a classic display of chivalry. In the end, Courage does end up redeeming himself by rescuing Bunny, for which Kitty drops her prejudice and even offers thanks. Sure, tell that to the lump on his head from the sink whacking. By textbook standards, she might be seen as a villain, but really, she's a hero whose savior complex just happens to put her at odds with others. Number 2. Bunny from The Mask. Since the besties are practically inseparable, it makes sense that Kitty's friend Bunny makes it onto the list as well. Birds of a feather and whatnot. On the surface, Bunny seems a bit cold and standoffish towards Courage, albeit doesn't crack a sink on his head, but definitely gives him a "you're a dog so I don't trust you" glare. Now, the dark and also sad backstory behind this coldness of hers comes from the fact that, like we talked about before, she was surviving in an abusive relationship with the literal worst boyfriend in nowhere, Mad Dog. There was a time when no one could come between Bunny and Kitty, but Bunny fell for Mad Dog, who turned out to be this maniacal and controlling boyfriend who drives Kitty away. Bunny struggles to find her own identity, stuck in a cruel cycle of trying to escape and getting dragged back. This obviously develops a sense of distrust of dogs in her. Personality-wise, Bunny is the tamer version of Kitty's fiery spirit. She wasn't a villain per se, but just a victim of a toxic situation, who was always on guard. But when you've been trapped for so long, survival instincts kick in, and hers sometimes push her to the edge. But even this wasn't her own choice, but was forced upon her. Once Courage proved that he was on her side, despite being a dog, Bunny trusted him enough to make a daring getaway that she'd been dreaming of. By the end, she's thanking Courage, reuniting with Kitty, and proving she's not a villain, but just someone who needed a way out.
Another human being. And how fought.
Number 3. The Snowman from The Snowman Cometh. Third on our misunderstood roster is the Snowman, the main villain of 2 episodes, The Snowman Cometh and The Snowman's Revenge. The scientist Snowman comes off as this ruthless guy who kidnaps Muriel and Eustace in a desperate attempt to preserve himself by using the anti-melting gene. Now, the deal with the Snowman and his villainous actions comes from the tiny issue that he's encountering. That being said, he's the last of his kind, as in the last snowman to exist, and wants to add Courage, Muriel, and Eustace to his troop. His actions did not revolve around world domination, but rather knowing he's the last of his kind, wishing to preserve himself. By the time we see him again in The Snowman's Revenge, the North Pole has melted, and he's back in nowhere, determined to build a West Pole right in the Bag farmhouse. Once Courage warms up to the Snowman, not literally, he reveals that the very sad reason behind his actions is that he's lonely. Courage ultimately helps restore the North Pole and reunites him with his old snow buddies, and maybe his snow girlfriend. For the snowman, it was never about malice, and sure, kidnapping someone and holding them against their will to work in his ice paradise of West Pole can't be justified. But desperate times sometimes do call for icy measures. The snowman is not really an evil mastermind, but rather someone who just wants to survive, and whatever means necessary to achieve that is okay for him.
I said no cops!
Number 4. Schwick. Up next we have Schwick, a giant sneaky cockroach who's unbelievably street smart and appears in Courage in the Big Stinkin' City as the main antagonist. Textbook hustler from the big city who won't shy away from going to any lengths in order to survive. Hailing from the town of Bushwick, hence the name Schwick, has a direct moral compass and is first introduced to Courage and the Bags, wherein he's seen holed up in the basement of Radio City Music Hall, wherein he supposedly lures people in with promises of fake contests, only to have them be eaten by an unidentified creature that lived in the mouse hole. And yeah, while that doesn't give a lot of misunderstood villain vibes, he's just a petty criminal who's caught in the rat race of the big city and has to survive by hook or by crook. When you're just a roach in the big city, which is not really bug-friendly, dodging exterminators and whatnot doesn't exactly open doors to honest work. Sure, personality-wise, he's sneaky, shady, and has that typical convincing salesman bit going on for him, but at the same time, he's resourceful, persuasive, and faces whatever challenges life throws at him head-on. In fact, throughout the episode, some glimmers show that he is more or less lonely, homesick for his town of Bushwick, and not really someone with serious malicious intent. By the end of the episode, Schwick comes off as someone who, under different circumstances, could have turned out differently, a potential ally, but is again, like others on this list, a victim of his own story, forced to act like a villain.
Oh my!
Welcome to my...
Number 5. Dr. Gerhardt and his house. Dr. Gerhardt von Orbison is one of the show's more tragic cases of mistaken villainy. Introduced as a reclusive sound doctor who lives in a palatial, albeit peculiar house, Dr. Gerhardt is befriended by Muriel. But there's someone who doesn't like this budding friendship, and surprise, surprise, it's Gerhardt's house, which he's literally brought to life through special music as a means of companionship. Like an overprotective, possessive child that doesn't want to share in their parents' attention, the house acts out by hurling furniture, slamming doors, and causing chaos to drive the bags away. From the outside, it looks like Gerhardt was orchestrating the attacks, making him seem like a classic villain, but in reality, he's a victim of the house's ruffled emotions as well. The house, too, isn't a typical villain who's scheming deviously, but rather stems from his fear of abandonment and fear of losing the only person he loved, both brought together out of loneliness, one human soul, and one, well, architectural, is just misunderstood. It's only when Courage and Muriel repaint the house pink, tidy it up, and breathe warmth into it that the once jealous house calms down, its tantrums slowly melting away with each coat. By the episode's end, a whole neighborhood has sprung up around the once abandoned house, with Dr. Gerhardt and the house now open for forming new connection. The real awe moment hits when the house, no longer furious, gently thanks Courage with its carpet tongue.
Lead to my oil well.
An oil well. Yes.
Number 6. Shirley the Medium. Shirley, a mystical green chihuahua who plays a recurring role in the series as a supposed villain, is next on our list. But Shirley's the kind of villain who wouldn't actually harm you, unless you've been greedy, selfish, or downright rude. Like with Eustace, her least favorite human being. Being a medium, Shirley has a high moral compass, which she doesn't compromise on, and she doesn't encourage others to either. Often entering the episodes with an ominously mysterious aura and her green dress covered by a purple cape and a blue hood flapping, Shirley ends up being the voice of reason by the end of the episode, subjecting the immoral with spells that can only be reversed if they repent and clean up their act. Shirley always finds a way to teach them a lesson. With a passion for money, she charges heavy fees to Eustace, whom she calls the Stupid One, as a form of payback for his rude behavior. A lot of Shirley's so-called villainy comes from the fact that she never sugarcoats anything, which gives people the vibe that she's out there to cause trouble, when in fact, she's trying to do the opposite. If that's not the peak definition of misunderstood villain, I don't know what is. So maybe the undeserved title of being a villain is just a side effect of her moral compass, wherein she cannot stand seeing good go unrewarded and bad go unchecked. Number 7. The Perfectionist. Textbook strict and old school teacher, down to the rolled bun and ruler smacking habit, the Perfectionist was appointed to change everything and anything in Courage that wasn't perfect, also hinted to be a manifestation of Courage's insecurities about himself and overall doubts. The Perfectionist pushes him through nearly impossible tasks, expecting it to be done impeccably. From balancing books up the stairs to building the Eiffel Tower out of toothpicks, Courage just can't catch a break. The turning point comes when Courage meets a friendly fish in the bathtub, who teaches him that perfection perfection is overrated, and encourages him that he can do anything he sets his mind toward. Once Courage realizes that, the perfectionist quite literally melts away, again supporting the idea that she was, in fact, just a figment of his imagination. Yes, she's the ultimate mean teacher stereotype, but if we dig deeper, she wasn't all that bad. Her motive wasn't to ruin Courage's life. Instead, she wanted to fix him of his imperfections that might hinder his growth in life, and she used the only way she knew best, through relentless, old-fashioned discipline. The problem is that's a lonely, exhausting way to live, with impossibly high standards of perfection set before you. In the end, Courage breaks free of the fear she unknowingly embodied and the insecurity she represented, which in itself is a perfect full circle moment for a story about misunderstood villains, proving that sometimes the scariest things just need to be seen for what they actually are. Marvelous verdict. Courage the Cowardly Dog, scary as a kid, more so sad and deep as an adult, gave us some villains who weren't villains at all, just souls shaped by pain, fear, and the messier corners of life. The show might have been packaged as a funny cartoon, but underneath the slapstick and surreal humor lay some genuinely dark human truth. Somewhere, each one stemmed from real human struggles. Trauma, desperation, perfection, loneliness, raising a mirror to the villains we've internalized. Maybe, in a way, each misunderstood villain was just a reflection of the parts of ourselves we'd rather not face. Which of these was the most understood in your eyes? Drop your answers in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the like button. We'll see you next time in the next marvelous video.